The Adelaide was the newest and most advanced ship the world had to offer. It was so large that it could hold over 20 passengers in addition to the crew and goods it carried. It was the second week of their long voyage from England to America that the young philosophy student Jacob Lester became friends with the Transylvanian adventurer Alexandre Albescu. They met every evening in the dining room and stayed late after dinner, enjoying a beer or two. "See that young woman over there, Jacob?" "Yes, well, what about her?" "I feel sorry for her. She's all alone and looks miserable. The only people who speak to her are men who regard her as a piece of meat." "Can you blame them? She's pretty, she's rich, and it's a long trip to America. I heard from the crew that she must be the Duke of Chesterton's daughter." After she had eaten, she got up and went straight to her bunk. She did indeed look unhappy and lonely. Meanwhile, Alexandre and Jacob continued their cheerful exchange of wild stories and drank beer. It was early in the morning when they were both awakened by a shout in their respective bunks. When they arrived on deck, a small crowd had already formed. It took them a while to get a look at the body. Jacob thought the man looked unnaturally white. Shortly afterwards, the captain arrived with a few of his sailors and had the onlookers removed. Alexandre identified the man as Albert, a writer who wanted to move his main residence to America. He would find better inspiration there, he had said. It was not uncommon for a passenger to die on a long voyage. Now, most of them hit their heads while drunk or fell over the rail. Alexandre and Jacob went back to bed and spent the day that way. When it was time for dinner, Alexandre intercepted the young student, already at his bunk. He told him to just follow him in the dining room. Jacob thought nothing of it. Then in the dining room, Alexandre simply sat down at the young woman's table, and Jacob did the same. "Excuse me, dear lady, we don't want to disturb you, but we thought you might welcome some company. This young man here is Jacob Lester, a student of philosophy. My name is Alexandre Albescu, Transylvania's greatest, most famous, and bravest adventurer. Please do us the honor and dine with us." The pretty young woman giggled. Apparently, she liked the adventurer's humorous manner. "My name is Isabella Charles. It would be my pleasure to dine with such a prominent adventurer and his friend." The three had a nice chat over dinner, and for the first time since the journey had begun, Isabella stayed in the dining room after the meal. They chatted animatedly about the stormy weather, politics, and the man who had been found dead this morning. The young woman was happy to have met two people who regarded her not as a piece of meat, but as a friend. They agreed to meet for dinner tomorrow at the same table before going to bed. Each of them slept well and then spent the day in their respective cabins. The weather was so rough that it did not allow for anything else. It was raining and storming heavily. No one had seen the sun for days. When it was time for dinner, the threesome were happy to be reunited. There was only one problem. There was nothing to eat. From their table, they could see over the counter into the kitchen. The cook seemed very rushed. "Hey, Smudgy, what's the matter? Where's the food?" "It's not my fault. Sean didn't show up for his shift. If you want your food, you're welcome to come wake the drunken bum up and tell him to get his lazy ass to work." "You know what, gentlemen, the cook is right. Let's wake the man up." Isabella's newfound confidence pleased Alexandre. The young woman led the group. A sailor they met on the way told them where to find Sean's little cabin. As one of two cooks, he had the privilege of having his own little cabin instead of squatting in the dormitory where the rest of the crew. When they arrived, Isabella knocked on his door. No answer. "Get your drunken butt out of bed. We want to eat." No answer. "Maybe he's sick. We should go see how he is," said Jacob. The adventurer nodded and opened the door. Unlike the passengers' cabins, his could not be locked. In the sparse light of a candle that would soon draw its last breath, they saw Sean. His head was hanging out of the hammock and was eerily white. He had two small puncture wounds on his neck that looked like the bite of an animal. Isabella wanted to scream, but she didn't want to embarrass herself in front of the others. After Jacob checked his pulse, which was probably a bit unnecessary, they called the captain, and he took over the examination. A few other guests and sailors had overheard what had happened and started whispering. It was another hour before dinner was ready. All three sat at their table, but no one really ate anything. His body was so white, just like yesterday's. What could do something like that? Asked Jacob. I don't know, said Isabel. Did you see the wound on his neck? It looked like something bit him. Yeah, I noticed that too. But what kind of animal can accomplish such a thing? Suck all the blood out of a strong man's body? That must be an interesting animal. There's something I must tell you, Alexandre said. The two were all ears. I thought of it when I saw the first one dead yesterday and how white he was. When I saw the wound on the cook's neck earlier, I was sure what we were dealing with. Now Isabella and Jacob were really curious. In Transylvania, there are old stories about similar cases. The most famous was in a village near the castle of a once great ruling family. I don't remember the name of it, but every day a villager was found dead. All of them had not a drop of blood left in their body and a bite wound on their neck. At first, people thought it might be an animal, just like Miss Charles said, but the killings did not stop. More and more villagers were killed in exactly the same way. The men of the village got together and they suspected a group of travelers who had arrived in the village on the day of the first murder. So they gathered around the inn where the group had been staying and dragged them all outside and beat every one of them to death. The next day, they were about to burn the bodies when one of the men noticed that a corpse was missing. From then on, the men patrolled every night and imposed a curfew on the others. The murderer had no chance. He attacked one of the men after a few days and bit him in the neck. The others rushed in to help him, so they saw that it was a young man from the group they had killed a few days ago. He shouted at them in an inhuman tone and bit into the guy's neck again. One of the others tried to help his friend, but the attacker grabbed his victim and threw him with one hand. In the days that followed, they studied every book the church had on creatures of the night, and eventually they found out that the young man belonged to a long-forgotten race. They were called vampirski, vampires. Both of his listeners were silent throughout the story. Jacob, in particular, was intrigued. But do you really think that a monster could have committed the murders? That would mean it's on this ship with us, far from land. I think it's possible, and we'll find out if the killings continue. The vampire was so strong it could throw a full-grown man with only one arm. Are you sure about that? Is that true? Alexandre was a little taken aback. I don't know if the whole story is true, but that a vampire has powers far beyond our own is passed down in every one of the vampire stories, and it makes sense, too. They must be very strong if they exist, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to kill their prey the way they do. Interesting. So, what should we do now? We know it only hunts at night, and it will first prey on those who are too careless. Locking our rooms and only leaving them during the day should protect us. For now. And so they would do for the next few days. For dinner, the three of them went and left the dining room as well. That way they were safe. But that was not true for the rest, because the murders continued, day after day. Crew members and passengers walking on deck at night were the preferred victims, and they were all found drained of blood the next morning. Slowly, the mood on board changed. The passengers and crew suspected each other. Nerves were on edge. Alexandre told the other two to be careful now. Everyone here was dangerous, not just the vampire. The next day at dinner, Jacob had an idea. Listen, I made some calculations. The weather isn't exactly playing into our cards. We're going to need at least another 5 to 7 weeks. Even if we're careful, we won't be safe for long. If the vampire doesn't kill us, chances are good that panic will break out on board, which could also kill us all. Or imagine the captain is the next victim. What do we do then? So I was thinking we should take the initiative. We should catch the vampire. Are you crazy? How are we going to do that? He's stronger and faster than us. But we're smarter. Isabella will arm herself with a fishing net, and you take your beloved machete. Alexandre, you'll wait by the stairs while I play decoy and walk the deck. When I call you or shout, you'll rush to my aid, throw the net over him, and stab him if necessary. Then we'll tie him up. The other two weren't too keen on the idea of fighting the vampire, but Jacob was right. They were no longer safe here, even if they did nothing. Catching the vampire would keep them all safe. Jacob got them one last beer before they prepared for the raid. Then Isabella and Alexandre took up position by the stairs, and Jacob made his way to the deck, where he walked around, seemingly drunk. After almost 30 minutes, just before he was about to give up, he heard a scream. It was Isabel. The student ran as fast as he could, but it was too late. All three of them were lying on the floor. Alexandre had a hole in his chest, and Isabella's throat had been bitten out. Beside them lay the vampire, unable to move. That was nail-biting, wasn't it? Jacob Lester laughed. Nail-biting, you know. Oh, sorry, I'm just so damn funny. He knelt down next to the creature. I figured you wouldn't be able to resist. You know, those two had something in their beer that doesn't sit well with you. The blood of a dead man. It will be my pleasure to study you. I already have some ideas what we can do with your blood, or with your DNA. Please have mercy, kill me. I just want peace at last. What a coincidence. I want the same thing, but not just peace for you. I want peace for everyone. I am the man of peace, and you will help me achieve my goals. Now let's see about squeezing you into the box I brought for you for the rest of the journey. The man of peace broke a few bones in the vampire as he forcibly squeezed him into the far too small box in his quarters. Every day he injected him with some of the blood of a dead man, and the experiments began. Hi, horror fans. Do you want to learn more about the Man of Peace? Then click here for the next video.